You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
It's Monday. That means I am, of course, joined by Pierre McGuire from McGuire Monday. Pierre, man, where do we even begin today? Well, let's start. Let's start here. Toronto Maple Leafs are now staring down the barrel of what has to be a full-blown rebuild, right? Like, surely no one in management can think that this is still in some sort of retool phase.
Oh, they can, and if they are, they're delusional.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work that has to go down in this long-range planning, short-term planning, mid-range planning, development of the American Hockey League, communication between Cincinnati, their East Coast Hockey League team, and their American League team, what they're going to do with U.S. college free agents, because there's going to be a plethora of those guys available. Yeah. This is a really important, critical, long-term strategy thing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I don't know how much you've heard people talk about it, but I'm going to tell you from the outside looking in and from also having been on the inside looking out, not with Toronto, but with other teams, if they don't have that meeting internally, and if they haven't had it yet, they better have it soon, because if not, this is going to be a very painful next decade. Very painful.
I'm going to share a personal analogy with you here, Pierre. This past weekend, I spent a lot of my time rebuilding a piece of wall. There were some cracks in drywall. And so, I took some of it out and I patched it and I sanded and I patched it and I sanded and patched it. And now when I run my hand over it, it's a bit wavy, and I'm thinking to myself now, I should have just cut out that sheet of drywall and put a new one in. Is that not exactly what this team has been doing for years? Plastering over and trying to refinish this wall when really they should have torn it out and rebuilt a new one.
Kyle, I knew I enjoyed being with you and working with you because you have some semblance of intelligence, actually a lot of intelligence. That was really well done, and that's exactly what's gone on. That's exactly what's gone on. And it's not just Toronto. There are a lot of teams that are in the same kind of situation. Philadelphia would be another one to look at. And Detroit forever was doing the same thing. St. Louis Blues were doing the same thing. Some teams can get out of it. Some teams can't. Calgary Flames were another one that was doing the same thing. So you can see where they go, and they don't go to the top. They go down, and then it's a total rebuild. So that drywall you're talking about, that has to eventually come down. Absolutely.
That's right. You can't just keep patching things. And so all of this, to me, you have to look at the core pieces of what is this whole team is structured currently around. And we have to start with Auston Matthews. And I want to read a quote or part of a quote he gave a few years ago talking about his desire to stay with this team unless it went off the rails. Now, here's my question to you. He's eligible to sign an extension in 2027 with this team, and he's always been clear that he will let his long-term be known to this team, and apparently they're not worried about him withholding that information from them. Is this management group scared of having one truly terrible season in order to rebuild this team because of quotes like that? Because of them, like if they were to really unload in the offseason and really start this thing from scratch, are they worried that he will leave shortly thereafter?
There's a good chance of that. There were a lot of rumors a while ago when Arizona was still in Arizona, not in Utah, Kyle, that eventually he was going to end up with the Arizona Coyotes because he's obviously from Scottsdale. And there were tons. It doesn't mean that they were factual, but there was a huge buzz around. And the ownership in Arizona actually, I think at that time thought, we get him, we change our future because of the drawing power. Well, that never came to fruition. But here's what I would say. Toronto made one critical mistake based on how things were perceived in the media and with the fan base with Mitchell Marner. They better not do the same thing with Auston Matthews. If you're sure you're going to get the proper compensation for Auston Matthews, you do the deal. They did not get the proper compensation for Mitchell Marner. It really affected a lot of things with their team this year. Power play, penalty kill. Even though the penalty kill has been a bright spot, still it affected it. 5-on-5 scoring, it affected Auston Matthews. It definitely affected Matthew Knies. Nobody's talking enough about that. Matthew Knies has had the most disappointing season. I'm telling you, as somebody that really likes the player and has been watching him a long time, even going back to before he was at University of Minnesota, I couldn't believe where his game was this year. I couldn't believe it. Still can't.
And the two of us were both very high on him coming into the season, figuring he would shoulder the load, but not only shoulder the load, help steer this team into that direction that they keep claiming they wanted to go, the Craig Berube style. And for better or worse, that's either not worked out because the personnel's not in place or it's just not right for this group.
You know what's funny? We talked about this, Kyle, at the start of the year. One of the things that I thought would help drive Nyes to that next level was the chance to be on the U.S. Olympic team. Mm-hmm. I thought for him, it was, especially because he's playing with Austin for good portions of the year, that USA Hockey would see that and they'd see this guy shining and the insulation for Auston Matthews. And nothing could have been further from the truth. You know, when you actually look at Team USA's lines that played in the Olympics, they didn't have anybody outside of maybe Brady Tkachuk that should have played like or Matthew Nyes could have played like. They didn't have anybody else like that. Like JT Miller wasn't like that. Vinny Trocheck's not like that. Jake Gensel's not like that. Matt Boldy's not like that. You know, I go down. So Nyes had a spot to earn. He had a spot to take, and he didn't do it.
He forced their hand, essentially, basically.
Basically, he did.
Yeah, going into the season, they were of course looking at him. Yeah. He was a star in Toronto, or a budding superstar, perhaps.
Yes.
He's derailed from that, but he's also so very young, and he has a lot of time. This has been a tough environment for any of these guys to play in. So if you're Leafs upper management, and my God, I hope they come to the conclusion that a serious rebuild and not a retooling is in order here. You pretty much have to bring Auston Matthews into the war room with you and show him the charts of going, here's what we need to do. We're going to dump these salaries and we can't get as much back as we'd hope because it's now the off season and they're never as valuable. And whatever it is, and just be like, we're going to chart this path. Are you in? And they have to give him the chance to think about that and chew on that. And I know there's going to be complicated off-season conversations, but it can't be as simple as, are you staying or are you going? Because they have to give this guy a chance to see the direction, if they even have one at this point, or if they even have a plan, instead of giving him just a simple question. No, he's earned that.
Absolutely. That's really a good way to pursue it. So I'll use an example just to back your point up. Last spring, after Edmonton got beat by Florida in Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final, there were lots of rumors about Connor McDavid. Mm-hmm. One of the things that was really transparent is Stan Bowman and Jeff Jackson flew from Edmonton to Hamilton to meet with representation of Connor McDavid. And I'm sure Connor was either patched into the meeting or was at the meeting. I don't know. But they basically said, this is our plan. This is what we want to do. Not long after, Connor McDavid signed a 2-year extension with Edmonton. He believed in what they were trying to do. That's great. And then eventually they end up having to change the plan a little bit because their season doesn't start the right way. And one of the first guys out the door is Stuart Skinner, who's one of McDavid's best friends. Mm-hmm. But to your point, they did that exercise. That exercise has to take place in Toronto. There is no question in my mind. But there also has to be another part to the exercise. The guys that aren't at the same level as Auston Matthews, some of them need to be brought in, and they need to be told, this is what we expect from you. We didn't get that from you. And if you don't want to be here, tell us now, because we're going to move you. Some guys need to have the soft shoe. Other guys need to have the iron fist. Because a lot of guys have been cruising there. They've been cruising, and they know who they are, too. They know.
And I know who at least one of them is because he's performed below expectations, I would say. And not even just on the ice, but off the ice. Willie Nylander needs to change his attitude a little bit, I think.
He does. This is the NHL. It's not about, and you said something before that I really admire, and that was, it's not the YouTube. It might be the YouTube generation, but the National Hockey League's not YouTube.
Yeah.
You know, and stop with the X's and stop with all the facial stuff and stop with all. Let's get 1 year where it's hockey. How about that?
Focused. Yeah.
Just focus on hockey for 1 year. Just 1 year. I can tell you right now, like if you want, I can spend a lot of time telling you some of the good fortune I had of really good players I coached. You know, Mario Lemieux, Paul Coffey, Mark Recchi, Kevin Stevens, Jaromir Jagr, Ronnie Francis, Joey Mullen, Larry Murray. You want me to keep going? I can keep going. Christopher Pronger. Like, I had the honor and the privilege of being the same planes with those guys on the same ice. Amazing players. Not one of them, when the season started, ever lost their focus. They were pros, man. Hard, in your face pros. And anything less than success was no good for them. I'm telling you, and there were some painful days when we weren't playing well. That was no fun. But they fought their way through it. You know, I think back to a 19-year-old Chris Pronger. And I had him with the late Brad McCrimmon as partners and roommates. And I'll tell you one thing right now, that kid, in his first 5 years in the NHL, that's the best year he ever had. You can go look at the numbers. That was his best year. And part of it was because he had this old pro, this grizzled old pro that was so in his face and so challenging, but in a positive, nurturing way. And that was Brad McCrimmon. And Toronto needs guys like that. I don't think they're enough. You know when they said they wanted to change the DNA? Those are the guys that change your DNA. I don't know if they have any guys like that.
Okay, so we've talked about the players and their role in this rebuild and who needs to come and who needs to go to some degree. And we've been talking about it for weeks now, especially leading into the trade deadline. What about the front office? Is it time for changes there as well, too? And, I mean, this is not – I never like the tone of, like, crapping all over someone or whatever, but sometimes pieces just don't fit into puzzles any longer when we thought they did. Is like when we're talking rebuild here, are we talking rebuild is my question. Yeah. Do they need a coaching change? Do they need an upper management change? Because you can only step in front of the cameras and take the blame, as Trey Living did so many times before it's like, okay, but what's going to change?
So the best thing that I think for ownership and upper management, it starts with Keith Pelly, obviously, because he's the conduit between ownership and the hockey side of the management. You have to sit down and say, okay, Brad, what's your plan? Show us your plan. Tell us your plan. What is it? And if you don't like it as an ownership group and a management team, you got to go in another direction. If you do like it and you think it's got a chance to be successful, don't make change just to make change. But if you say, you know what, we're not buying into this. You had your opportunity last year to quote unquote change the DNA. It went backwards. I can't say this enough, Kyle. You know, you and I have both said it, but I'm going to say it again just because people can blame me. The Mitch Marner thing was boggled unbelievably. It was a terrible misstep by the group. The way it was dealt with, the way it was handled after the fact, that was so wrong. So wrong. And they could say, you weren't in the negotiations. You don't know what was said. Here's what I do know. Once you allow negotiations to get personal, and I've been in a lot of them, once you do, it's doomed to fail. It's doomed to fail. So you may not like what they say to you, and they may not like what you say to them, but you got to find a way to get to a middle ground. And I'm not going to say the player, I'm not going to say the negotiation, but I've been in some pretty substantial ones. I'll never forget doing one, and it was acrimonious. Not in the public eye, but behind the scenes. And at the end of the day, the owner calls me up and says, thank God we had adults in the room to calm everything down. Because if you don't decrease the environment and bring it to a level place, this is what happens. You get Mitch Marner. Can't have that again. Cannot.
And it's so easy as the fan base to pin so much of this on the shoulders of the players. But as we've seen, and I'm going to use these two guys, we've now seen in international play, both Mitch Marner and Auston Matthews. These are big game hockey players, but big game hockey players need a support system that surrounds them off the ice as well as on. And what happened in the Mitch Marner situation was that they lost that connection to each other, and he had to go for personal reasons, and they had to move on for personal reasons. But that was a circumstance that was allowed to fester, and it was allowed to manifest, and they didn't get in front of it fast enough, and the damage was done. But let's move.
I'm just saying, fester's the proper word.
But that's what it was. It was mold growing. It was mold growing, and it was long before that playoff exit last year happened. It was just. They need to shield these players a little bit better. And in these larger markets, and Toronto's no different. The New York Rangers are facing this in a big market right now too. We'll talk about Montreal in a second. Like, there's big market teams that are facing this type of pressure now, and you have to shield your guys to some degree to allow them to focus on hockey and play their best. And maybe we're seeing a little bit of that with Nylander right now, which is why those offseason conversations, they have to be two-way. He needs the iron fist and the upper management. Well, what do you need? They need to also ask him, because he is a superstar in this league.
So I love that. He is a superstar. Acknowledge that. Don't be afraid to say that. He's a superstar. But then I would say, this is what I would say. Here's the responsibility of a superstar. Yes. You may not like it as a player, and you may not like it as his agent, but here's the actual responsibility of a superstar. He's our hardest worker. He understands the difference between pain and injury. He puts himself in the very best position to be great every single night. He's coachable. He's a good teammate. He's approachable with the media. Superstars get paid to be superstars. They get paid because there's huge demand, there's huge expectation, and if you can't measure up to it, you're not a superstar. You might be a star player, but you are not a superstar.
And the difference between a star player and a superstar is all those things you just mentioned, Pierre. Yeah. Okay, so let's move into the present day here. Tomorrow night, the Toronto Maple Leafs play Montreal, and it is going to be the 5-week to the day anniversary of the last time they won a hockey game. Now, we all know there was an Olympic break. We understand that. But from a fan base point of view, they only understand time. And for a team to go 5 weeks without winning, even with that break, especially having gone into the break on 3 straight wins where we're like, hey, wait a second here. There's been 2 or 3 of these, hey, wait a second here, turnaround fakes, fake turnaround things we've seen from this team, and they've absolutely folded coming out of the break. What's going to happen with this team the rest of the year? Are they playing? They're obviously playing the string out now. They're not going to make the playoffs, but how do they position themselves to at least hang on to the fan base? How do they give this fan base hope?
One of the most important things when you're going through this as a team, and I have coached teams that have gone through this, is players need to know that they're not just playing for the team, they're playing for themselves to keep a job. You know, people don't want to hear that, but it's an important part of this thing. Because if you're perceived as a quitter, or if you're perceived as a malcontent in the National Hockey League, that does a huge amount of damage to your reputation and your profile amongst other decision makers in the league. It does.
And they all talk.
You're darn right they talk. Yeah. That's why it's such a closed club, because they all insulate and protect one another. Mm-hmm. So I'll just tell you, they talk a lot. And this is where players need to know you're not just playing for the organization. You, at this point, are playing for yourself to maintain a position in the league. And once you're perceived as a malcontent or a lazy player, so to speak, in the league, that does damage to your reputation. So that's part of how they're going to do it. And Craig Berube has taken a huge amount of criticism. His staff has taken criticism. But I would say this, the change in the DNA didn't happen.
It did not happen.
That's way above his pay grade. He has I can tell, again, I have no problem sharing this with anybody. Coaches don't make player personnel decisions in the National Hockey League. They do in football. Right. They do in football, I can tell you that. They do not in the National Hockey League. There's an old saying, owners own, presidents preside, managers manage, coaches coach, and scouts scout. When you're a coach, you don't scout, you coach.
Coach the players are given. This team needs a blood transfusion, and they just keep taking mouthful of Advil, and it's just not. But it's exactly what's happening here. They just need to. But I mean, they're going in to play a Montreal team that is also trending in the wrong direction, Pierre.
Boy, on Friday after 3:00, I was working in Lake Placid, New York, on the ECAC Women's Frozen Four. It was an amazing event, by the way. Unbelievable. The people in Lake Placid would be so proud. All the schools that were there: Quinnipiac, Yale, Princeton, Cornell. The hockey was at another level for women. It was at a complete other, in a good way. So I was there, but just before the game started, the first game was at 4:00. I was so disappointed at 3:00, not because I'm a Montreal fan, but the avenue to win for a team like Montreal or a team like Boston in the Eastern Conference was there. The team that stood up the most, Buffalo Sabres. The Buffalo Sabres, all you have to do is watch their game with Tampa on Sunday night, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that.
They went to another level because their general manager recognized the fact that a lot of their star players get pushed around. I'll quote Brian Burke, my good friend, no more Mr. Nice Guy. They're mean. They are a Buffalo team now. Sam Carrick's a Buffalo player. Logan Stanley's a Buffalo player. Luke Shen is a Buffalo player. They got nasty guys there now. They're no fun to play against. They're mean.
They weren't fun to play against before, and now they're not fun. Now it's the offense combined with a little bit of violence. Yeah. my favorite brand of hockey. Pierre, honestly, at this point, listen, I want to tell all of our viewers, do yourself a favor and go to the NHL's YouTube site and watch the game highlight package from that 8-7 hockey game last night. Yeah. if these two teams do not meet in the playoffs, it will be the disappointment of 2026 for me, because they have teed us up for what is going to be potentially one of the best playoff series we've seen. These two teams, as of now, do not like each other, and they played an incredible 8-7 hockey game yesterday. That was just absolutely electric. And it was the identity of this Buffalo team that you just described.
The last time the league had this kind of good fortune, the potential for good fortune with national ratings on playoffs, was when Pittsburgh and Crosby and Washington and Ovechkin were playing these I was doing them all with Doc Emmerich and Eddie Olczyk, these barbaric, savage, dirty, unbelievably skilled series. The numbers were off the charts, but they were always in the first or second round of the playoffs.
Right.
And then one would survive and one would be dead. That's just how it was. And usually it was Pittsburgh that survived and Washington that was dead, marked. So, that's just how it is. But you're right. If they ever play, this will be one of the great series in the last 15 years, I would say, in the league. It would be unbelievable. But it's part of it is because Buffalo didn't get pushed around by the media, and they didn't get pushed around by their fans. Do you remember at the start of the year, first 15 games, Lindy Ruff's got to go, this player's got to go, that player's got to go, Dahlin's bad, Thompson's bad, everything was bad. And then to the Pegula's credit, they did fire Kevin Adams. They did not fire Lindy Ruff. They did not fire their staff. Internal development of a player like Owen Power or Matthias Samuelsson, Bowen Byram, they all started getting better. Zach Benson, all of them started getting better. Jack Quinn, all of them started getting better. And look where they are now.
Yeah, and it's a team built in the image of that city itself.
100%.
And you can see the electricity
100%.
in the fan base. It's so fantastic. I just wanted to end on some sort of a positive note here, because in Leafland, there's not a lot of great things to talk about. But Pierre, thank you once again for joining us. We'll see you next Monday. Enjoy the week. And man, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Montreal tomorrow night and for the rest of the season for this Maple Leafs team, because they have to decide as a group of men on the ice how much quit is in them and how much they're willing to fight for their jobs, for their city, for the crest on their chest, and for their sense of pride.
I loved how you said that. I'm working that game, post-game for Montreal, and I would just say this. Everything Kyle just said is so spot on. It really does. I said this to Kyle, just one quick one. I know we got to go. The Toronto Maple Leafs are a really important franchise in the NHL. That doesn't get said enough. It's important in the United States because they transfer over. Their Maple Leaf is a huge brand. And in Canada, for TV numbers, it is really an imperative organization. It truly is. And if this is going to be a long rebuild, there's going to be a lot of pain. It's not just in Toronto. It's going to be around the league. They're a really important franchise. Just telling you that.
And Pierre, it's pain that may be necessary, as we discussed in this entire show. Thanks again for joining us here in Toronto Sports Rush. We'll see you next week.
Always, my friend.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.